The eels arrived first, as they always had, silent, silver, and hungry for voltage. They came in the moonless dark, their bodies knotting into scriptures of light beneath the waves, writing stories no human eye could parse. Ancient mariners whispered of their migrations, of how they swarmed the Bermuda Triangle's heart like pilgrims returning to a church of salt and static. They called it the silver tide, blamed it for compass needles spinning wild and radios choking on dead air. But the eels were older than ships, older than myths. They had a covenant. In 1945, a naval aviator's final transmission crackled through a storm. "They're not eels there," before dissolving into harmonics that burned out the receiver. His plane was never found. Neither was the Soviet submarine that vanished tracking their bioluminescent trails in '68, nor the freighter that radioed about a city breathing in the deep in '93. The triangle took its tithe, and the eels thrived. They were patient, they were waiting. Theirs was a purpose etched in synapses and electromagnetism, a duty older than the first human spark. They sustained a fragile equilibrium, their bioelectric pulses stitching a fragile veil over a wound in the world. But humanity, ever ravenous, began to notice the energy in their flickering bodies, how it could power cities, how it hummed with secrets. Greed, that blunt instrument, always hammers first at the extraordinary. Now the veil frays. The eels feel it, their migrations quicken, their light burns hotter. Somewhere in the abyss, something ancient, something the eels were made to contain, tastes the first drop of human ambition. And begins to wake. Chapter 1. Location: aboard the Eidolon, a privatized research platform in the Bermuda Triangle. The storm arrived as they always did in the Triangle, unannounced, violent, and hungry. Ren Varric watched from the reinforced glass of the Eidolon's command spire as the horizon folded into itself, bruised purple clouds swallowing the last gasp of daylight. Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating the carcass of the Anthem, a cargo ship listing drunkenly in the swells. Its distress signal had crackled through the Eidolon's speakers an hour ago, a garbled chorus of screams and static. Now it was just another ghost in the ledger, another line item for the insurance vultures. Varric's drones circled the dying ship like metal vultures, their floodlights carving jagged wounds in the dark. He didn't believe in ghosts, not the kind that haunted ships anyway. The ghosts he feared were quieter, the ones that lived in profit margins and boardroom whispers, the ones that clawed at his throat when shareholders questioned his obsession with this cursed stretch of ocean. Green energy, they had scoffed. Harvesting eels, you've gone full mad scientist, Varric, but they hadn't seen the data. Hadn't watched the thermal scans pulse with unnatural light, the eel swarms clustering in geometric patterns no animal should understand. Life was just another battery if you knew how to crack its code, and Varric had always been good with codes. A chime sounded, soft, insistent. The drones had found something. Location: the Eidolon's submersible bay, 10,000 feet below the platform. The eels glowed. Dr. Soren Kestrel pressed her palm to the acrylic viewport of the drone control room, her breath fogging the glass. On the monitors, the swarm undulated in perfect synchrony, their bioluminescent bodies etching electric blue sigils into the blackness. She had studied Anguilla rostrata for 15 years, tracked their migrations from the Sargasso to the Baltic, but this was wrong. Eels didn't move like this. They didn't think like this. The patterns matched no known schooling behavior: hexagonal formations, Fibonacci spirals, a language written in negative space. "They're reacting to the drones," murmured Holly's Vey, his voice raw from too many stimulants and too little sleep. He leaned over her shoulder, fingers dancing across a holoscreen. "Look at the EEG readouts. The bioelectric fields are spiking in tandem with the harvester's M pulses. It's like they're conversing." Soren said nothing. The eel's light cast jagged shadows across Holly's face, sharpening the hollows under his eyes. She had stopped trusting words weeks ago. Words were for grant proposals and press releases, for Varric's silver-tongued promises of sustainable futures. Down here in the crushing dark, there was only the silent mathematics of predation. The eels wove through the drone's titanium claws, their bodies flickering like faulty circuitry. One brushed against a harvester's sensor array, and the screen flared white. Another glitch, Hollis muttered, stabbing at the console. Third one this hour. The AI's parsing algorithm can't handle whatever signal these things are emitting. Signal, the word lodged in Soren's ribs like a fishhook. She thought of the anthem, of the way its crew's final screams had dissolved into that same static-y scream. Location, the deep zone, 23 degrees N, 76 degrees W, 12,000 feet below sea level. The drone descended. Varric watched through its camera feed as the abyss swallowed the light. Pressure readings scrolled crimson warnings across the screens, but he had paid extra for the boron carbide alloy, for the fractal shock absorbers stolen from NASA's Europa probes, worth every cent. The drones were all that mattered now, sleek, autonomous things, their hulls studded with bioreceptors designed to siphon energy from the eel's electromagnetic fields. Living batteries, the media called them. Varric preferred evolution. The feed flickered. For a heartbeat, the screen showed something else, a lattice of light, vast and impossible, its geometry straining against the limits of the lens, then static. Reboot the damn thing, Varric snapped. The text scrambled. Someone muttered about thermoclines, about the triangle's infamous magnetic anomalies. Varric silenced them with a look. He had built his fortune on anomalies, on the glitches everyone else dismissed. The screen resolved. The drone had reached the seafloor. No, not the seafloor, a city. Varric's breath hitched. The structure sprawled across the monitors like a fevered dream, its architecture neither coral nor metal, but some grotesque marriage of both. Towers spiraled upward in twisted helixes, their surfaces studded with bulbous growths that pulsed faintly in time with the eel swarm overhead. Bioluminescent tendrils snaked through the ruins, connecting domed chambers that throbbed like organs. And everywhere, the eels, rivering through canals, coiled around spires, their bodies feeding into gelatinous bioreactors that hummed with stolen lightning. God, someone whispered. Varric didn't believe in gods either, but he believed in power. Retrieve a specimen, he said, the brightest one. Location, the Eidolon's wet lab, 400 hours. The eel died slowly. Soren watched its light dim in the tank, the electric blue fading to corpse gray. Its autopsy had revealed nothing, ordinary musculature, ordinary organs. But the EEG Hollis had locked himself in the server room after seeing the EEG. Not possible, he had kept repeating, not natural. She pressed a scalpel to the eel's spine. The first cut released a smell like ozone and rotting kelp. The second split the flesh cleanly, revealing a cluster of crystalline nodes along the neural cord. They pulsed faintly, responding to the lab's fluorescence. Soren reached for them. Then the lights died. Darkness, then a sound, not a voice, but the memory of one, vibrating in the marrow of her bones. The system reinitialized. The hologram bloomed above the dissection table, a shifting mass of light, formless yet deliberate, its edges fraying into fractal patterns that hurt to look at. Soren staggered back, scalpel clattering to the floor. Custodian protocol activated. Warning, stasis lattice integrity at 89.7%. Primary power source, genetically modified Anguilla prime, depletion detected. Advisory, cease harvest operations or risk unweave incursion. The words weren't spoken. They occurred, blooming inside her skull like migraines. She tasted copper, felt the ghost of something vast and cold pressing against the back of her eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. The hologram pulsed. "We are the architects. We are the failed. The lattice holds the unweave at bay. You will seize." The lights returned. The hologram vanished. On the table, the eel's carcass had liquefied, leaving only a smear of iridescent slime and those damned crystals, glowing faintly in the dark. Location: Varick's private suite, dawn. The whiskey wasn't working. Varick stared at the specimen jar on his desk, the crystal nodes floating in preservative fluid. They had pulled 12 more eels from the deep zone, each with the same anomalies, each a key to unlimited energy, unlimited control. The custodian's warning played on a loop in his secure feed: unweave incursion, interdimensional predators, fairy tales, garbage to frighten children, and yet. He glanced at the security monitor. The lab tech, Gareth Grant, hadn't moved in 17 minutes, just stood there in the hallway, facing the wall. Varick zoomed in. The man's eyes were open, unblinking. His lips moved silently, forming the same phrase again and again. "Can't wake up." Varick killed the feed, drained his glass. The crystals glimmered, casting sapphire shivers across the ceiling. They looked like stars. Chapter 2. Location: the Eidolon research platform, 48 hours after the custodian's warning. The storm never left. It coiled around the Eidolon like a starving thing, its winds gnawing at the platform's rust-stained legs. Ren Varick stood at the viewport, his reflection fractured by rain, and counted the ghosts. 3 crew members missing, 12 drones unaccounted for. 1 lab assistant found catatonic in the mess hall, her pupils dilated to black moons, whispering about faces in the walls. The custodian's hologram had not reappeared, but its warnings lingered in the static between heartbeats, in the way shadows pooled too thickly in corners. Varick tightened his grip on the specimen jar. The eel's crystalline nodes glowed faintly through the glass, their light bluer than logic allowed. Living batteries. The phrase echoed in him, a half-remembered lullaby. He had built empires on less. Location: the Eidolon's flooded submersible bay. Dr. Soren Kestrel waded through knee-deep water, her boots sloshing against the grated floor. The bay's pumps had failed 2 hours ago, drowned by a glitch in the AI's pressure algorithms, or something else. Holly's Vey crouched beside a damaged drone, its clawed appendages curled inward like dead spiders. He didn't look up when she approached. "They're doing it on purpose," he said, voice raw. "The eels, they're sabotaging the harvesters." Soren said nothing. She watched the water ripple around her legs, the surface oily with rainbow sheens. The eels were closer now. She felt their electric signatures prickle her skin, 1,000 invisible tongues tasting the salt in her blood. Holly stood holding up a drone's shattered bioreceptor. "See these burns? They're not from pressure or corrosion. It's a feedback surge. The eels are overloading the circuits when we try to extract energy." He laughed, a thin, broken sound. "They're fighting back." Above them, the bay's speakers crackled. Varick's voice, smooth and serpentine. "All teams report to the command spire. We've located the primary bioreactor." Location: the deep zone, alien city interior. The city drew breath. Varick's submersible descended into a cavernous chamber, its walls veined with bioluminescent tendrils that throbbed like exposed nerves. The custodian's hologram flickered intermittently, its fractal edges dissolving into static. It had guided them here, though guided felt too kind a word. Lured, perhaps, trapped. Dr. Kestrel pressed her palm to the viewport. The chamber's center housed a massive bioreactor, a pulsating, gelatinous orb suspended by sinewy cables. Eels swarmed around it, their bodies merging with the reactor's membrane in bursts of violet light. Each fusion sent ripples through the water, distortions that warped the sub's metal hull with audible groans. Primary power source, the custodian intoned, its voice a blade in their skulls. The lattice is fracturing, you will cease. Varric ignored it. Initiate the harvest. The drones detached from the sub, their claws extended. The eels reacted instantly, swarming the machines in a storm of bioluminescent fury. Screens filled with error codes, alarms shrieking as feedback surges crippled the drone's systems. One screen showed Holly's face, pale and sweating. The lattice integrity's down to 74%. If we drain this reactor, we might. Proceed, Varric said. The sub shuddered. On the reactor's surface, a fissure split open, weeping a viscous black fluid that bloomed into clouds of ink. The eels scattered. The drones struck. Location: the Eidolon's medical wing. The missing crewman returned at dusk. They found Grant curled in a supply closet, his uniform stiff with dried salt, his fingers clawed raw. He didn't speak, didn't blink, but when Dr. Kestrel pressed a sedative to his arm, he seized her wrist with terrifying strength. "They're inside the walls," he hissed. His eyes were wrong. The irises had split into fractal patterns, branching like lightning. Soren recoiled, but Grant's grip tightened. "You open the door, you let them taste us." The lights flickered. Grant's head snapped toward the ceiling, his neck cracking audibly. "They're here." Then he was gone, not vanished, but unmade, his body dissolving into a cascade of black particles that hissed against the floor like acid. Location: Varric's private suite, midnight. The whiskey burned, but not enough. Varric studied the lattice schematic on his holoscreen. The custodian had transmitted it during the failed harvest, a shimmering web of energy nodes spanning the Atlantic, each anchored by eel swarms. A cage, a tomb, his tomb if he let fear rule him. A knock. Holly's entered without waiting, his face gaunt. "The unweave isn't a myth. You saw what happened to Grant, to the anthem." Varric didn't look up. "I saw a pressure-induced psychosis, a known risk in deep-sea ops." "Bullshit. The bioreactor harvest destabilized the lattice," the custodian said. The custodian is a malfunctioning AI, one that's sitting on top of the most advanced energy tech in human history. Varric finally met Holly's gaze. "You want to quit? Fine, but I'm not letting superstition bury this." Holly's stared at the specimen jar on the desk. The eel's nodes pulsed faster, as if agitated. What if it's not superstition? What if we're prey? The lights dimmed. For a heartbeat, the air thickened, smelling of ozone and burnt hair. Then the moment passed. "Get out," Varric said. Location: the alien city's bioreactor chamber. The water burned. Soren floated beside the reactor, her dive suit sensors screaming as the black fluid ate through the sub's hull. The drones had ruptured the membrane, spilling the reactor's contents into the abyss. Now the eels were dying, thrashing, glowing brighter and brighter until their bodies burst into ash. The custodian's hologram materialized, its form splintered. Stasis lattice integrity, 61%, unweave incursion imminent. "How do we stop it?" Soren shouted, her voice muffled by the helmet. "Restore the reactor, replenish the Anguilla Prime." "There's no time, the eels are gone." The hologram flickered. "Sacrifice." A pressure wave slammed into the sub. The viewport cracked. Soren watched in frozen horror as the reactor's remnants collapsed inward, forming a singularity of dark light. From its heart, something moved, a shadow with too many angles, a sound like bones breaking in reverse. Location: the Eidolon's command spire during the breach. The unweave arrived at 3:16 a.m. It began with a flicker, a split-second glimpse of the Anthem's wreckage materializing in the storm, whole and unbroken. Then the screams started. Crew members ran past Varric's office, their faces smeared into static. Walls dissolved into corridors that hadn't existed moments before. A tech stumbled into the spire, his mouth unspooling a ribbon of black liquid that hissed, "You will not wake up." Varric staggered to the viewport. The storm was gone. The sky had peeled back, revealing a void teeming with prismatic geometries, the unweave. Shapes slithered through the platform's lower decks, half-solid horrors that phased through bulkheads, their bodies fractaling into infinite reflections. A hand gripped his shoulder. Holly's, wild-eyed, shouting over the cacophony. "We need to reboot the lattice. The custodian says there's a neural interface in the city." "No," Varric wrenched free. "My drones can still salvage the reactor. We can control this." Holly's stared at him. "You're killing us all." Location: the deep zone, neural interface chamber. The interface was a tomb. Soren stood before it, a Nacrian sarcophagus fused with machinery, its surface etched with eel-like glyphs. The custodian's voice boomed in her skull. "A mind must bond with the lattice, sustain the connection. The cost is fatal." She thought of Holly's, of his wife and child in Reykjavik, of Varric's hollow ambition, of Grant's fractal eyes. The chamber shook. Through the viewport, the unweave's tendrils lashed the water, dissolving drones into dust. She stepped inside. The sarcophagus sealed. Chapter 3. Location: the neural interface chamber, deep zone alien city. The sarcophagus was alive. Soren Kestrel felt its walls first, cold, gelatinous, breathing against her skin as the machinery fused with her nervous system. The custodian's warnings had been clinical, detached. Fatal, it said. A word for textbooks, for autopsy reports. Not for this. Not for the way the interface's tendrils slithered into her veins, rewriting her pulse into something alien, rhythmic, a drumbeat syncing with the eel's dying light outside. "Sacrifice," the custodian had said. She thought of Holly's, of his hands, always trembling, always working, of the way he had smiled at her once, years ago, when they had first mapped the eel's migration, a brittle, hopeful thing. She had never told him how much she had needed that smile, how it had anchored her. Now the interface flooded her mind with the lattice's schematics, a shimmering web of bioelectric threads spanning the Atlantic, fraying at the edges. The unweave pressed against its gaps, a roiling mass of non-geometry, hungrier than the dark. Location: the Eidolon's command spire, engulfed by the unweave. Ren Varric no longer recognized the sky. It had become a collage of stolen moments, a childhood memory of his daughter's laughter spliced with the Anthem's sinking hull, the stars smeared into equations he couldn't solve. The unweave didn't destroy, it rearranged. Crew members flickered in and out of existence, their bodies stuttering between solid and static. A deckhand sprinted past, her legs dissolving into tentacles of shadow. Another knelt, vomiting black oil that pooled into a mirror reflecting Varric's face, older, gaunt, his eyes eaten by the same fractal rot that took Grant. "You did this," the reflection hissed. He smashed the mirror with his boot. The shriek of glass drowned the lie. Location: the neural interface chamber. Holly's found her. The sub's hatch hung open, seawater sloshing as the unweave's tendrils lashed the hull. He had followed her coordinates, ignored Varric's orders, and now here he was, pale, shaking, his dive suit streaked with bioluminescent slime. Soren's body floated in the sarcophagus, her eyes open but unseeing, her irises replaced by the lattice's electric blue latticework. "No," he whispered. The custodian's voice boomed. "The interface requires a neural bond. irreversible. Hollis pressed his palm to the sarcophagus. Cold bit through his glove. He thought of his daughter's birth, the way she had gripped his finger, impossibly small, impossibly alive. I named her Lumi, he had told Soren once, after the light in the deep. He climbed inside. Location, the Eidolon's collapsing reactor core. Varric ran. The platform shuddered, its metal bones groaning as the unweave unstitched reality. Walls melted into fleshy membranes, dripping acidic bile. A shadow reared, a creature of angles and teeth, its body folding into impossible dimensions. Varric fired his sidearm. The bullets passed through it like smoke. Coward, it hissed in his daughter's voice. He stumbled into the drone control room. Screens showed Hollis subdescending, Soren's vitals flatlining. Another screen flickered, the neural interface chamber, Hollis' body now fused with the sarcophagus, his face a mask of agony and resolve. Sacrifice, Varric understood, a currency he had never traded in. Location, the neural interface chamber. Two minds now. Soren felt Hollis merge with the lattice, his consciousness braiding with hers. Memories flooded her, his daughter's laughter, his wife's funeral, the guilt of a bridge he had designed that collapsed in a storm. 7 dead, my fault. She poured her own memories into him. The first eel she had dissected, its heart still beating in her palm, Varric's hollow promises, the way the stars looked from the Eidolon's deck, cold and indifferent. Together, Hollis whispered in their shared mind. The lattice flared. Location, the deep zone, alien city during collapse. The eels returned. Varric saw them through the drone feeds, a river of light surging from the abyss, their bodies streaking toward the fractured reactor. The custodian's hologram materialized, splintered but triumphant. The Anguilla Prime answer the call. The lattice will hold. The unweave recoiled, its tendrils blackened, crumbling into ash as the eels fused with the reactor, their bioelectricity weaving a new lattice thread by thread. The alien city glowed, its spires humming with resurrected power. On the screens, Hollis' vitals flatlined. Soren's followed. Varric's hands trembled. The specimen jar slipped, shattering, its crystalline nodes rolling across the floor. They pulsed once, twice, then dimmed. Location, the Eidolon's deck at dawn. The storm died. Varric stood in the ruin of his empire, the air thick with salt and ozone. The unweave had retreated, sealing the sky's wounds, but the scars remained, a permanent shimmer on the horizon, a reminder of how thin the veil was. Crew survivors huddled on the deck, their eyes hollow, their whispers fragmented. He found Soren's body in the med bay, Hollis beside hers. Their faces were serene, lit by the lattice's residual glow. The custodian's final message played in his neural implant. The Nacrians failed. We harvested too deep. Do not repeat our error. Location, Reykjavik Harbor, 6 months later. The eels glowed. Varric watched them from the dock, their electric blue trails cutting through the fjord's black waters. He had surrendered his patents, funded the preservation zones, but the guilt clung like the stench of the deep. A child's laughter startled him. A girl, 5, maybe 6, danced at the water's edge, her mother scolding her in Icelandic. The girl turned, and for a heartbeat, her eyes flickered with the lattice's light. Lumi, the mother called. Varric froze, the girl waved, her smile too wise, too old. Then she was gone, lost in the crowd. Above, the aurora borealis shimmered, green, gold, and a faint, impossible blue.